All right, is everybody ready? All right, let's call the meeting to order. This is a joint meeting with the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners and the Planning and Development Board. It's Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. It is 5:01 p.m. If everybody could please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this time in the agenda, we take a brief moment of silence. This moment is for your own reflection. We always take this time to thank our first responders and the men and women in the military who protect our freedoms abroad and at home. All right, thank you and welcome everybody. With today's meeting, this joint workshop is to review our comprehensive plan. We're going to have presentation and discussion on the different points within the different elements within the plan. So who is going to start us off today?
All right. Good evening, commissioners and planning board members. Thank you for joining us this evening and for your flexibility in scheduling this third joint workshop of our comprehensive plan update. We have made some exciting progress.
And this is Simone Kenny.
Simone Kenny.
Thank you.
We've made some exciting progress and some big improvements in our public engagement, thanks to both our consultants and the wider Flagler County team, including our Tourism and Development Department and our Communications Department. I will let Chris Doherty of Inspire Placemaking tell you about that process, as well as where we are now and our upcoming next steps.
Excellent. Thank you, Simone. Chris Doherty with Inspire Placemaking Collective. Mr. Chair, thank you for having us and indulging us for a third time in a joint workshop. I did just want to echo real quickly what Simone just mentioned. Really tremendous response after we kind of regrouped after I think it was our second joint meeting. We had not a great response with the survey and the online engagement and the participation at the in-person workshops. We had a tremendous participation at the third workshop, and I'll let you know here in just a minute how we did on the surveys, but a huge increase.
Before you go on, I just want to clarify our timeline tonight, Sean. Is there a meeting tonight for the planning board, right, at 6? So we're going to be on a schedule to be done by 6.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Just wanted to clarify that and make sure everybody knew.
Andy, if I can. Are we going to have a quorum tonight?
Yes. As far as we know, we just need Mr. Wilcox to arrive.
Okay. So we'll see what happens this evening. All right.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No. And we do have some slides that are repeats, so I'm just going to kind of zip through those.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the update, where we're at with, we've got the summary for the last workshop up on the website. So if you weren't able to join us, we have that available for your review, for the entire public's review. Talk a little bit about where we're at with the implementation. I think you all have seen in the packet, we've got some draft goals, objectives, and policies that we're working on with staff. So that's like really early on in the process that you get to participate in that, which is really neat. And then we'll talk about the next steps. So you all know what the comprehensive plan is. This is really just a reminder for folks if they don't have the opportunity to join us. We just kind of remind them, it's the big picture document, helps implement that vision, really concerned with growth and population increase and assist landowners with what they can do with their property and developers and so forth. Why are we doing this? Well, not just because it's required by state statutes, but because the county needed to take a step back and really reassess the vision and address that in the comprehensive plan, which is that is our main focus. We have the website, just plug that here just a moment ago. That's the tinyurl.com/Flagler 2050. And that's where we have the different exercises in the survey for folks to take And I believe we're getting ready to close that survey. It has been closed. Okay, so the survey has been closed. We have taken in all that online information, which has been tremendous. And I'll let you know here in just a moment. So here we are, we're at the joint workshop. We are nearing the end, the completion of this long process. This has been great. I think other than maybe the in-person participation, everything has kind of gone according to plan. So that's great. Doesn't always happen that way, but we followed the course, and it's worked out really well. And so we're advancing this, getting closer to those adoption hearings. Again, this is a recap of the input that we heard during the interview sessions and our listening sessions with folks. I'm not going to mention these because this is going to come up again here in just a moment. So we talked about these at the second joint meeting. Again, this is really more for folks at home if they have opportunity to take a look at the presentation online. I do want to mention the survey because we had some changes. So I think when we came back here for the second meeting where we had 20, 30 responses on the survey, we are now at almost 900 responses, which is tremendous. So it has changed things a little bit, and I'll make note of those. But we talk about issues, land use, housing, transportation, infrastructure, parks and open space, natural resources. These are all the planning initiatives, things that had come up during that process. But we also talked about those at the first workshop, and all of this is kind of built off of those initial engagements. So your priorities have shifted just a little bit, and this is based on that survey. So the first one being conserve, preserve the natural environment. Number 2, address stormwater drainage and flooding. Number 3, preserve the rural area and the character. Number 4, ensure an adequate water supply for existing and future population. Ensure residents of all income levels have safe and affordable housing options. And then number 6, what I think is a new one, improve the county's public school system. Okay, so those are the priority initiatives based on the online engagement. These have shifted just a little bit as well. So your top areas, or your top 3 concerns, if you will, infrastructure, so roads, utilities, traffic congestion, impact on natural environment, crime, housing affordability, those kind of rose to the top as concerns for the community. The areas that the community is most satisfied with in the county: transportation-related items, greenways and trails, connectivity of roads, bicycle facilities. We do know we have some additional work to do there too, which is, you'll see some of those changes in the plan as it comes along.
Chairman, just on this page, just had a quick question. When I've been thinking about this and talking to some other counties and stuff, obviously we want to maintain our green situation, more open space, all that kind of thing. We also have an objective of housing affordability. I know this is more a land development code issue, but we have to be very careful as we push forward on this. I know that in St. Johns County, they ended up on the, remember Andy on the tree thing. If you start increasing the cost of a house, the low-cost housing, because you put these additional requirements in for land use and so on, so you have this mix. Have we addressed that at all, or talked to the builders or something like that to find out? We have to be careful about what we're doing.
Absolutely. So the more regulation that you put in place on development, it could potentially increase the cost of that development. One of the things to offset that is density. I know sometimes we don't like to talk about that, but if we're talking about areas that are urban in nature or have infrastructure already, we really do need to look at potentially increasing densities in those pockets, so future growth. And this relates to another area where we're headed. So
Affordable housing has a lot of exemptions built into it, so that would fall under one of the exemptions in order to keep affordable.
Yeah, and the land development code would also have a lot to do with that. I'm just wondering, have we talked to people who or involved from the side of, building housing and things like that, to make sure that we're not doing something that I'm not smart enough to figure out, that would hurt things. That's all.
And the costs for things, not just development, but also the items that we're talking about, some of these are really big ticket items, and that we're really going to have to think about how we're going to fund these things in the future. We can have them in the plan, but eventually we're going to need to figure out, we talk about the environmentally sensitive lands program and land acquisition for that. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But okay, so non-related items that the community's satisfied with: fire, EMS, law enforcement, and libraries. Okay, I'm going to zip through these here a little bit. So housing types, this is the preferred housing type for Flagler's future. 74% single family, 36% of folks would like to see mixed use, and 30% of folks are interested in seeing townhomes. So we talked about increasing density, and you'll hear about the term missing middle. I'm sure you've all heard about that term, and that's kind of where your townhomes fall. And we'll talk about that here in just a sec.
40%.
Okay, so we had, we give them multiple choices. So they, yeah, right. So we had our second workshop that, that was when we sounded the alarm and got folks out to that third workshop, and we talked about some really cool stuff. But related to the second workshop, we converted some of those activities to online activities. And in this case, we ended up with 230 responses on an activity that we talked about at workshop number 2. And these are the priorities that came out of this. Is a transportation activity. So number 1, folks would like to see the roadways maintained and repaired. That was their number 1 issue. Number 2, expand and connect the sidewalks and pedestrian facilities. Number 3, expand and widen roadways. Number 4, expand and connect trails. It's kind of related to number 2. And then number 5, streets that are inclusive of pedestrian, cyclist, and vehicular-friendly infrastructure, more commonly referred to as complete streets. Okay. And so where this kind of led us are these vision initiatives, if you will. And again, these are all related to what you've been hearing so far. We're just kind of synthesizing all this information. So conserve the natural environment, maintain and improve existing infrastructure, ensure future water supplies, clean for future and existing residents, be resilient against natural disasters, improve drainage, improve access to natural areas, foster walkable and vibrant places, preserve the rural areas, and support agricultural activities. So those are the primary vision initiatives, and that we received 84 responses on that. And I believe we had, 20 opportunities? 20 selections on that particular question. That was kind of one of those big board activities from workshop number 2, and folks were able to do it online. So that was the pivot, so to speak. So where did this lead us? So we have this draft vision statement. In the year 2050, Flagler County will represent the best Florida has to offer: scenic waterfronts, working farmlands, and charming rural communities preserved through the strategic cultivation, and growth of walkable and vibrant neighborhoods served by a resilient and sustainable infrastructure. So that's just your draft vision statement based on everything we've heard. Okay, so these are your vision directives. Again, this is the culmination of both the online public engagement, listening sessions, working with the commissioners and the public to get to this point. I'm not going to rehash these. These are the ones that we just talked about from that previous activity. So where did that lead us? So public workshop number 3, we wanted to hear about strategies for addressing these vision directives in the comprehensive plan. So we got a lot of responses on all of the different themes that we talked about. And so we've narrowed down the priorities during that exercise, and these are those strategies. So in increasing resiliency against natural disasters, folks want to see that we do address resiliency, ensure that we're consistent with the vulnerability assessment and the compound flooding study that's going on, so make sure that that's implemented in the plan. The nice thing is you've already really kind of taken the first step for resiliency in creating adaptation action area within the coastal high hazard area, which is a step you didn't have to do, but you ended up doing that already. So you're moving in the right direction. And then coastal hardening in areas that have experienced significant erosion. I know we've had some issues with roadways washing out and the like. So maybe not necessarily beach renourishment as part of that project, but doing something else along the coastline to protect the infrastructure there. And then concentrating future growth to existing urban areas. This is something I alluded to, and how are we going to do that? And we've talked about this. The strategy is engaging the communities here in Flagler County and developing ISBAs, so the interlocal service boundary agreements. Again, this is just an idea because we understand that we're trying to identify areas for growth, but also areas to preserve the rural character. There are not a lot of tools in our toolkit to address that, but through ISBAs, we feel like that would be the best way to help kind of identify your growth areas for not only the county, but for the cities in Flagler County, but also how are we going to keep maybe that west side rural and making sure that we can support and protect agricultural activities in the future. So that's kind of the big picture plan for the future land use element. And I know that's going to take some time and some effort to maybe get everybody in agreement on what those ISBAs look like. So essentially, we're asking those communities to identify where they want to annex to and where we think where it makes sense. Where should the growth happen, right? The community said it should happen where we have infrastructure. So if that's the case, let's show those on the map. Okay, with conserving the natural environment, you've got the environmentally sensitive lands program for land acquisition. We had talked about securing dedicated funding because that's really going to be a tough thing to acquire, and in terms of actually getting land, because land is not cheap. And we talked about potentially doing a sales tax, and that's just some ideas for getting dedicated funding.
But ours is dedicated, so
Is that through the general fund, or is it?
it's a separate millage, right? Separate millage,
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Right.
Wonderful.
ESL.
Yeah, and maybe that's another opportunity to maybe stack on that for additional opportunities for land acquisition. Maybe it's not necessarily just for environmentally sensitive lands, but we talk about providing for opportunities for recreational activities as well, and maybe that could compound that. Again, just some ideas, because you're not only getting funding through, residents, but folks who visit here and take advantage of those facilities when they come and hang out.
And we've had success legislatively. So last 2 years, 2 different appropriations totaling 20 million. So
Excellent.
we're working other avenues as well.
That's great. And then partnering with organizations to ensure the preservation of natural shoreline and waterways. And that may be partnering with, the communities along the coastline, Flagler Beach and marine land and so forth. Require specific open space requirements for residential and LDRs. We have that in the comp plan today. It just hasn't really been implemented yet. So those are some of the things we're looking at doing, maybe updating. Identify specific habitats or ecosystems worthy of protection. Again, these are some of the ideas that came out of the strategy. Some of these things you're already doing. So it's a good thing. Maybe there are opportunities to enhance these activities. Require cultural resource surveys for development along the water bodies. We understand there are a lot of cultural resources, archaeological or historic structures. For establishing a connected and safe bicycle, sidewalk, and trail network, the community would like to see creating priorities for those connections. So where does the county want to connect these facilities? So do we have these parks and open space system, making sure that we're connecting back in a logical manner and providing for a more cohesive network? And then ensure that the trails, again, connect throughout the recreational system. And then looking at the Florida Wildlife Corridor as opportunities as well. And then complete streets, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but making sure that the streets don't just address vehicular mode of travel, that we're looking at a full, spectrum of travel options. Okay, improve drainage systems. Continue to implement the stormwater master plan. Potentially looking at establishing a stormwater utility fund. Again, stormwater facilities are not cheap to construct, and then coordinate with your local municipalities and make sure that we're looking at these systems maybe in a regional manner, rather than just the county taking care of that themselves. Cultivate a more affordable and diverse housing market. Prioritize affordable housing opportunities for low-income seniors. That is one of the largest groups that are facing homelessness. So that's one of those things that a lot of communities are struggling with. Allowing accessory dwelling units in residential zoning districts. Allow for the missing middle, and the missing middle being the duplexes, triplexes, townhomes. So it's a slightly higher density than what maybe you're used to, but, oh, okay. Okay, maintain and improve public facilities, enhance the park system, explore developing a regional sports complex, require sewer connections along the coast, improve and maintain road surfaces, stormwater improvements along the intracoastal, and then improve beach access. With preserving the rural charm and character and supporting agricultural activities, we talked about the ISBAs being an important part of the strategy. Promote agritourism, farmland conservation easements. It's another opportunity to help, protect the farmlands. And then protect, emphasize, promote not only the historical resources, but the cultural resources of the county. Okay, I think we only have a couple more left. Continue to work with your economic developers. There was an idea of creating a covered outdoor arena. I understand that that's been a subject of discussion before. And then incentivize trade schools and apprentice programs and ensure a clear conduit between the in-demand labor force and the employers. Identify and incentivize large or local targeted industries. Promote heritage, eco, and agritourism. That kind of goes back to the prior slide. And then create a strategic economic development plan, department, and incentives. I think this is our last one. For clean water supply, the folks wanted us to explore desalinization. That's a really expensive line item. But this is that I think got one of the highest votes in this category. So establish a plan to convert septic to sewer. That's actually a requirement now by the state. We have to look at that. Test surface waters for contaminants in the PFAS, those forever chemicals. Explore alternative water supply sources. Explore creating a stormwater park, wetlands park for treating runoff. Okay. Now for the next steps. We're finalizing
Could
the
I
GOPs.
just ask one question? I'm looking at this as kind of our county comprehensive plan. So under maintain, improve public facilities and services, explore developing a regional sports complex. I've never thought that was a place we were headed. I know City of Palm Coast is thinking about doing that, but I didn't think the county had that as one of our thoughts.
Well, this was the public, right?
Right.
So we're.
I know it's the public saying that,
Right.
but, okay, I just,
Keep in mind, it does say explore.
Right.
It doesn't say the county shall develop a sports park.
that's true in all
Right.
this stuff. I'm just saying, I have heard nothing on the county side that we're thinking about doing a regional sports complex.
Sure.
That's all. Big deal.
And that is it for the presentation. We can discuss any of your thoughts and ideas, or if you have any questions, or I know it's a lot of information. There's kind of a lot of replication because, again, it shows that there's the common theme that's continuing through the public engagement. So there shouldn't be any surprises,
Right,
and
I
there
think-
not. No
I
surprises.
think we've all pretty much seen the progress that through
Yeah.
the public meetings, and the presentation is all pretty similar from what we've seen before.
Exactly.
Anybody have any on the presentation? Any questions? I know everybody's eager for the next step.
Yes, absolutely.
So the next step.
Is finalizing those GOPs. So you have in your packet, there's some draft goals, objectives, and policies. We've got a couple more elements that we're finalizing to get to staff. And so that's essentially what you saw in the slides are line items that we're addressing in the goals, objectives, and policies. So those are the things we're taking and articulating in policy or objectives, depending upon what the case may be. And we're cleaning up some of the organization, maybe even the kind of the length and make it a little bit more user-friendly to work through your goals, objectives, and policies.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Maybe it might be helpful, because I went through this packet. So obviously you have deleted and added language. First of all, I'm assuming this is in conjunction with staff?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Maybe you want to just go through the highlights of what those changes are in relationship to how these policies that, or these goals and objectives that you had in the earlier presentation, how these changes in here are accomplishing that, and, where, no reason to rehash some of the existing policies, just the new stuff that you changed. Maybe you can just quickly go through that stuff.
And it's actually what we just talked about. So those,
I mean, you have-
those
I mean-
strategies, some of those, I mean, for the most part, most of that was addressed in the goals, objectives, and policies.
Right, so I'm asking,
I think everybody has read through and seen the attachment with the changes to the goals. So are we going to go through, Simone, help us, are we going to go through in this type of public setting and read through either the comments that our board has come up with, or are you going to highlight, Mr. Langelo's asking about some of the changes in, either in yellow or where there's additional areas? Are we going to, do you need our input? So as a group, we've gotten together, not just to hear the presentation, but to actively work on this process.
right.
Right. So I think the reason staff included the GOPs is so that you could see that we were making progress and to see how the strategies were to be implemented in the plan. And I think we could talk about those maybe in more detail, or if you're looking at these different visioning initiatives, if you see strategies like we talked about before, if maybe the sports complex isn't really the right priority for the county, we don't have to include that. And if there are other strategies that you'd like us to look into or include, maybe ones that we didn't address, I think now's the time to kind of,
The comp plan is
talk
going
about-
to be this next section.
Right.
Is all these policies.
right,
The first part is not part of the comp plan, it's just how you're getting to that.
right.
So what I was asking would be, the major changes, the things that you're doing in this, if you can walk us through some, rather than us one by one trying to pick each one, what about this, what about that? If you can walk through, maybe Simone, you can help us. If there's stuff in here you want to start bringing up that, the board is, the board kind of commissioners are going to be voting on this, but talking about, how those things that you saw in the responses are now influencing what this policy will be. What are the policy changes you're making based on what these recommendations are?
Ms. Pennington?
Oh, since we only have 30 minutes left, because I read through it, I was just going to go through some things that look like they've been implemented based on what you presented. So if that's okay, because I think is that okay? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I noticed you implemented properties of historical significance and preservation, which we didn't have prior. But it looks like it's just to housing of historical preservations. Does that sound correct, Simone? Just houses that are of historical nature? Is there anything about like historic lands or agricultural findings on historic lands or?
So
That's under the housing element, probably why it's
That's
stuck
probably why
in
it's
there.
stuck in there.
Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
there may be another element that
not
hasn't
in
made
this?
made its way to
Right.
your packet yet. So
Okay.
that's probably under the conservation element or the future land. I think it's conservation where we talk about historic and cultural properties. And so it's not,
Right.
so I think in this
Okay.
case, it's
We'll
really
see
referring
something more
to,
on more historical. Okay, and the next one is the policy that you implemented that the county shall conduct a study to evaluate whether the hammock area on the barrier island should be identified as a special ecological district. What does that entail or mean or for the hammock?
sure, that was something that came up, I think, in the very first workshop that
Yeah,
folks were interested in identifying whether or not this is an ecosystem or ecological resource that the county should look at preserving and how we go about doing that. So that was kind of the impetus for that.
So we have an overlay. Does it mean that the overlay gets?
Include the,
Do we have a stronger statement in the comp plan so that the LDC can reflect changes in that would be my thought.
Right. So you have the scenic highway
Right.
already, right? That kind of provides some of those protections in that area, but maybe there needs to be a further discussion about land beyond the corridor, and maybe it is that hammock area, and if that's the specific area, then what are there opportunities to acquire land there from the the environmental sensitive lands program? Do we use that money to do that, or is it development standards to, kind of low impact development standards within that area?
and then the preservation of native vegetation standards, those are new for us. The 5%, 10%, 15% net site areas. It looks like they're new. Does that sound, or you're just not implementing them?
Or is that the section that says, is there a highlight?
The
that
county's
says
land
that-
development regulations shall include incentives so that new development can be designed in accordance with the limitations of the natural environment. This would include preservation of existing native vegetation standards that shall be 5% of the net lot area for single family.
I don't believe that's a new
10%.
policy.
All new, that
Those
all
are all
yellow
new?
is all new.
So those would be new implementations on vegetation.
Those ones, I believe, are existing and have been in the
Oh, okay.
conservation
They could have been
portion of
moved
the-
from another section.
I think it's a little confusing.
And you'll notice that there are comments in brackets that are notes to staff or notes, just kind of, hey, these are, we notice these are in the plan. They say to be implemented in the LDRs. They haven't been implemented yet. Should we keep those? Are they still relevant?
And I'm glad to see a whole new policy on agricultural conservation, the county doing a map, identifying properties that could go into conservation. So that was good. Then my final question, so they can move on, is, and I guess what I'm assuming is when we talk about that hammock and townhomes and all that, that's coming at a later date for us to really start to talk about
Right. So future
what we
land
want to
use-
implement out of that or not implement.
Right. So
All right.
future land use is that next big one, and that is kind of it usually tends to be when we do comp plans. It's like the biggest, plan element that we deal with, and that's still being drafted. But the biggest takeaway is we're looking at those densities, looking at growth areas, and then looking at establishing interlocal service boundary agreements down the road.
Okay.
And I will say that we've worked in a number of communities, 3 or 4 different communities that utilize ISBAs. And from what I can tell, they've been a great tool to help really clearly articulate where that growth is happening.
So as of today, really the biggest add from what you've given us is the piece on agricultural lands. That's a whole new section added in. Then it looks like, I forgot the other one, the hammock was added in to talk about doing, but that's about the biggest changes in here, right?
Which elements
tell.
made it to the
Have
packet?
you not
I
seen the
don't-
packet?
That was housing, conservation, and the intergovernmental coordination. I think another big one that's made it at least into the housing portion is the inclusion of potentially ADUs in single-family residential. That's probably another big topic. of
Accessory
conversation.
dwelling, is
Yes,
that, yeah,
accessory dwelling units?
right.
So this is three elements that we've got today.
Yes, so far.
Okay. The one thing on affordable housing is probably to get everybody else's thoughts was, right, we've had, to answer Commissioner Sullivan's questions at the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, we've had different developers coming in to talk about how things can, what they're looking for and how we can improve things. And one of them was an affordable housing board or a commission that's set up. The commissioners appoint representatives to this affordable housing committee or board. Is that something that's been talked about within the comp plan as one of our objectives, or has that been talked about yet? No.
You mean beyond the advisory housing committee?
Right. It's part of the requirements. I don't know if Ms. Petito wants to talk about it because it was something that was brought up in order to give affordable housing developers additional tools to get state grant funding. So
To have an additional advisory board.
additional advisory board. So that might be something we bring back.
I hadn't heard that yet. So thank you for that.
Chair, if I could
Yes.
chime in at this point, I want to make sure everybody understands that we didn't intend for you at this meeting today or this workshop to have gone through those elements with the red line that was provided at the end of this presentation with a fine-tooth comb. It was designed to just kind of show you the direction that we're going in. And we're going to return to the planning board and the county commission with a handful of elements at a time, so it's digestible. And at that point is when we would get into the nitty-gritty.
Well, that's kind of what I was asking, because it seemed we're getting this policy, these red line things, and we've got 1 hour to go through them, and I'm, let's get to this. It's not,
Right, that wasn't today's work, the purpose of this workshop. It's fine to hear your comments, but it was really just a 30,000-foot view of what's going on, the input that the consultant received, and where we're headed.
The problem is you be careful what you give us because
right. That's what we're,
because we're ready to start working on it.
right. Chairman, if I could.
Go ahead.
I asked this question, Adam, a long time ago in planning board, actually a previous planning board, and I'm going to bring it up again now. Does our county have any stated or projected county population goal? What I mean by that is a cap in any way, shape, or manner. Because one of the things you hear, now here, I'm speaking as a developer against kind of my own self-interest though. If there is no cap to development, to numbers of people, roads, utilities, parks, everything, we're constantly chasing our tail. If we have, let's say a project or a projected goal of 200,000 people by the year 2050 or 150,000. I'm not saying these are numbers, I'm just throwing something up in the air. Then that may help in where we start approving projects that come in for us, because we keep seeing, I saw this years ago, and I've seen it recently again now too, where we get, developers come in and, this time to start throwing housing in, and let's just start throwing these developments in, and there seems to be no cap to the development. So now we have to, of course there's impact fees, but that doesn't handle the whole situation. So is there any sort of an element that helps cap or give a projected cap to development population growth, either countywide or unincorporated wide?
So we do have population projections, and they're included in the data analysis.
But as a cap?
They don't function as a cap. It's more or less a goalpost.
So if we have 50,000 acres of land yet to be zoned, totally, when you get down to nitty gritty, I know we have a future land use map, but every time a project comes in, they meet the criteria, we give them another 200, 300 units, another 200, 300 units, another 500 units. And with no concept to what that's doing as far as total projection of where we want to be and what we can handle, we could easily create a bigger, an animal than what we've been planning for. So all the planning kind of goes out the window because we're just rubber stamping. They meet the criteria, we're giving it to them.
And what you'll see when we do have the data analysis presented with each one of the GOPs, we were showing the GOPs because that's kind of the strategy development. So we were kind of doing this working session as a group. But when you get the data analysis with each one of the GOPs, you'll see the population projections that are in the future land use element, as well as what we refer to as a carrying capacity of the future land use map. So we're going to tell you today how many units we think the map can accommodate and what the population yield would be, and whether or not you need to make changes to address that yield based on the population projections. Because by state law, if you're a community that's not built out, then you have to have a projection. You have to meet the bare minimum projection, which is Bieber medium. That's in the statutes for comp planning. So that is kind of the minimum, but there is no necessarily a cap that we put in place unless the board decides to do that.
Mr. Goodman.
All right, excuse me. We're missing a big point here. We're missing that there's a gorilla in this whole plan. We have no control over what the city of Palm Coast does. So the city of Palm Coast can develop like crazy, but in the meantime, we're struggling with the infrastructure to support their growth. And I don't think any of that's being addressed. I mean, if they keep building out as they are, they will, I'm going to guess at this point, the city of Palm Coast population is greater than the county?
Yeah, by far. But they in his strategy and what we've had in the past and what they're projecting in the future is this intergovernment communication, which, I remember back when we used to have, I think it was quarterly, that all the cities and the county used to get together, sometimes in the emergency management building, whatever. And I thought those meetings were extremely beneficial. Now, I don't know whatever happened to those.
We were doing them again. It's been with the city of Flagler Beach's urging. We've probably had 3 different ones now in the past year.
With all the different communities, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, to Mr. Goodman's point, we can do so much as a county because we're only talking about the land development regulations in unincorporated county.
Right.
And
then
a bigger animal is actually Bunnell.
Bunnell.
Because Bunnell is bigger by far than Palm Coast.
Well, you have Bunnell, you have the city of Palm Coast. I mean, we have no control over those, and they affect.
Well, we have input, no control, but we have input.
Oh, input only goes so far.
And we do have shared infrastructure and roads. I think we do have our own roads where both of those municipalities utilize our roads, which is a controlling feature.
Correct. But, on my drive here this afternoon, I was driving past development after development after development. Where are all these people going? Where the roads can't sustain them. I mean, I came down here from New York to get away from that. And now it's following us right here. It's unfortunately, I know the government is set up in a strange way. And since they have their own vision and the county might have their vision, I think they're colliding. And that's the biggest problem that I see, that we can't really control the growth.
I think the intergovernmental coordination element is probably a great addition to try and curb that. I mean, in theory, concurrency is supposed to be the regulating entity. If you're supposed to meet concurrency, whether it's roadways, utilities, all those things.
Well, yeah, but developer can contribite to the concurrency, so it'll keep going. So if
Right,
we don't
which is
make it, I'll
supposed
give you
to-
money for the school and I'll put some money into the road, and we're going to keep growing. And, again, I think, to Mr. Goodman's point, we don't control it all, but this panel is talking about unincorporated right now.
and I
So there
understand
is that to control, there's that to talk about, and that's all. I just didn't know if we ever had a strategy. I understand we have projections, but a strategy to say, let's not zone any more of this. Let's, on all DRIs and all, these larger projects, we need to look at what that total cap will be before we start approving more. And then in a certain amount of years later, the commission can always look in and increase the cap based on, the sentiment of the time and infrastructure. I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan.
Just to comment on this, and I know we have a lot of rules and regulations in the way we do the comprehensive plan and all that, but the only thing that the general public thinks about when they think about CAP is this statement: ITT built Palm Coast with a projected population of 250,000. That's the number that's out there. That's the only number that's out there that addresses, I think, your question. We're so far, that doesn't limit anything. And that's just Palm Coast.
I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I thought that the planning board and our board were the throttle on rezoning. So we need to hold to it. That's a lot of focus, and you heard it, was conservation. We're doing we will be soon seeing a lot of money put towards conservation because of our legislative asks. We've added in here agricultural, which is promising, making maps, working with farmers, working on a conservation plan for the ag. And then we need to build some portion of historical in to best we can of what lands we have that are left historical, that are in our privy. But then also, we just need to hold our stance on it, because we don't have utilities to offer to begin with. We are the more rural portion of the county, and then things that are currently ag, like people who have ranches up on, Old Dixie, and we need to hold to it. You need to adhere to the flume and everything else. That's the nature of the planning board and the county commission. We can throttle it if we want to, because we do have a lot of the land and we don't have the utility. So we could stick to our guns on some of that.
And some of the other things that we talked about, and maybe it's, the county situation, but doing a rural boundary, right? Like Seminole County. But I don't believe the county's not a home rule charter county, so that wouldn't work.
If I might
And-
speak to that, the
But-
big issue in that is funding. It's easy to talk goals, objectives, and policies, but as someone, let's say someone owns property, they're not going to be willing to buy into this if it's not financially rewarding for them. It's great to talk. The biggest thing on this thing that I'm seeing that I'm really excited about is the fact that we're talking about water, stormwater recapture, whatever it takes. We're virtually out of water, fresh, cheap water
Right.
in our state. We're seeing the St. Johns rivers literally reversing flow in some of the areas, creating a saline line that's traveling upstream. To be blunt, this actually discusses and kind of touches on it. I'm excited about seeing that come forward, knowing that this is like you said, the 35,000-foot view perspective. Let's put that part in action so we can actually begin to do it, because that's going to get us before we know it. That's going to become our limiting factor that you're talking about capacities real soon, real soon. We talked about desal. That is be unbelievably expensive. It's per gallon, you're gonna be buying it like you're buying bottled water at the store. People don't want to take a bath next, it's so expensive. That's where this and what I'm seeing from what we're seeing as far as our GOPs and our perspectives and our wants is going to really make a big difference in our world. I'm excited about that.
And I think that having that ISBA, if we can get there, that's another part of the picture is infrastructure, because the county doesn't have utilities, like a Palm Coast or Bunnell. I mean, there are, things that are a little bit out of our control. So if there's a way to gain some of that control through interlocal service boundary agreement, where you've identified specific responsibilities for Palm Coast, for Bunnell, for Flagler Beach, and the county within the area that you do want growth to occur, then I think that's the direction we can go in and hopefully achieve, and that will help. And I mean, if we're looking out to 2050, that's your line of demarcation, right? We've identified these areas where annexation can occur. That's where we've said growth should occur by 2050. If it hasn't happened then let's take a look. Let's take a step back and look at it again, right? So that there aren't many tools, like I said. That rural boundary is one that we talked about internally, but if we don't have the home rule charter, then we can't really implement that the way that Seminole County did. So the cities can just annex into the rural boundary and change the land use, and you're stuck with it. But in Seminole County, they can't do that because they're a home rule charter county. It's in the charter of the county, and any annexation they have to utilize the 1 unit per 5 acres, regardless of the city that's annexing into the rural boundary. So
There's no tools for the constitutional counties?
not to the extent that we're talking about, like in terms of the ISBA. That's really the only tool that I've seen work, other than maybe an urban growth boundary, which is kind of the reverse of the rural boundary. But again, unless you have those controls at the charter level.
Yeah, well, they tried to count the charter here a couple times. I remember it went over like a thud.
Right.
So.
Any other questions? This side?
Nope.
All right. So moving forward, what's our next step in this process for the comp plan?
So for LPA, that's where we'll go first. We'll go to the planning board and we'll present the items. I think the attorney said we're going to do that in chunks. We hadn't talked about that strategy just yet, but is that Adam's shaking his head? So
And we're
I'm
bringing
thinking
back
to make it,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I just meant, in order to make it meaningful, I think to have all the elements in one evening is going to be just too much.
right.
Are we bringing back different elements to this joint commission again? No?
No.
Before we have that discussion, if we could have all the elements in front of us, we can see how they relate and cross over. That'd be handy. Take the time to look at all of it and then discuss each item by item. That'd be a handy
Good
way in my
point.
world to see it.
This is our last joint workshop, I just want to throw one other thing out there that I think this board sees a lot. You guys don't really see it unless it goes past us, but variances. And I know that there's some state regulations with variances. I think we got 3 of them tonight. Some of it is hampered by certain regulations, and I didn't know if there's any way we could look at the variances any different than we are right now. One of the first criteria, and it's a big one, the hurdle jump all the time, is something unique about the lot. Now, I know that's probably a law through case law, maybe. Sean, I don't know, but there's just seems to be. I know we have in our LDC, I guess it is the administrative relief to a certain percentage, but is there, and a lot of them are stuff that we're going to see tonight too. These pool decks, and these are starting to be more and more of a prevalent issue. Smaller lots, and these, they're coming in with these errors in the field, and we're faced with this conundrum all the time. So, is there something that the comp plan would look at for that, or is that something just in an LDC?
the land development code, that's where you would handle that. And when we get there, we can dive into that issue and we
Okay.
can make.
Yeah, I
it
just
more-
didn't know if there was an overriding picture to look at when it comes to that. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, you're fine. We're getting close to the time, so if there's no final questions, we'll go ahead and close the workshop, and appreciate everybody being here, so that you can go to your next meeting. But sure, we'll open up the public comment. Sorry about that, my bad. We'll open it up for public comment. If you can line up, because we got a meeting at 6 o'clock, so anybody who has public comments, come on up.
Good evening, Jane Gentile, Youth, Plantation Bay. There's a lot of issues I'm concerned about. Environmental, poor planning. Most of all, I think that you need to immediately change the rules to comply with what other counties allow. Aggrieved should not have to be defined by 300 feet from a property, and I would like that changed immediately. Because if zoning issues have to be approved by the commission, a special exception is even more dangerous and requires more details and more experience. And I think immediately you should prohibit the planning board, who are not elected officials, from making decisions on special exceptions. And you should review other county codes and what they do. And I have sent, and I will send this case over and over, because this is Jane's claim to fame. I helped the county, Dade County, 26 years ago. I had more rights there than I do here. An aggrieved party was anybody who comes in contact with an area that is given a special exception. Now, my home is way beyond 300 feet from where these people want to put RVs, and thank God I live where I live. Okay, but my heart goes out when I have to use this entrance. The RVs, the road is only 22 feet wide.
Jane, excuse me. We have a planning board later on, and you might want to address this item at the planning board.
No, but this issue is not up there. I just want to say you need to change your rules to not only allow people who live within 300 feet to appeal a special exception, and special exceptions should be heard by the Board of County Commission like any other zoning issue. And any aggrieved party should be able to join in and appeal, but the appeal should only be at the level of the county commission, because the planning board should not have authority over special exception when all the other zoning authority is solely in the hands of the commission. You take the most dangerous zoning and you just give it to appointed officials who don't know the law, no offense, and you need to change that immediately. We have hundreds of people who are going to be affected currently by something not on the agenda. So please change aggrieved to not have a distance. Do what other counties allow. Anybody who is aggrieved should have a right to appeal, and the decision should maybe be made by the county commission, not the planning board on special exceptions. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm going to ask the speakers, please, to stick to the comprehensive plan, which is the topic today.
I just got a quick comment. I don't know who got these surveys, but I'm a Flagler County resident. I didn't receive a survey. None of my neighbors got a survey. That must be why the
Sir,
survey
can you
count's so
state your
low.
name,
Nobody
please?
got a survey.
Right, there's been different ways that the survey went out. So through the social
Going
media,
through without
through,
any public input, because there's a lot of stuff on there I disagree with. And I'm sure a lot of people in my district, District 4, wouldn't
Sir,
agree
can
with a
you
lot of it
state your
too.
name, please?
Change your name.
Edward DiMartino, 2000 South Old Dixie Highway. That's all I got to say. First time I've heard of a survey, and I would gladly fill out a survey if we would have ever got one, so.
thank you.
Hello, Harriet Castle, 14 Treetop Circle. I know you asked for it to be what you guys were talking about earlier, but I would like to say I agree.
I'm sorry, we're not picking you up on the microphone. Can you
You
step
have to speak
closer?
up closer to the mic. There you go.
Pull it up to you.
Okay. I'd like to say I agree with what Jane was just saying about changing the rule that it has to be 300 feet.
But again, this is for the comprehensive plan. So if you can stick to the items that we went over, you'll have time at public hearing for planning
I
boards.
understand that. I just wanted to quickly say, I wasn't going to take up the whole 3 minutes, that I agree with what Jane says, and it is something that I think it's important to the Board of Commissioners to consider, because 300 feet is just, a lot of people are aggrieved further than 300 feet to appeal a special exception. And also, I think you guys should hear it and not just the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment on the comprehensive plan? All right, seeing nobody come, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Planning Board.